this is Greg Schaefer, and welcome to the Virtual CISO Moment. Last week we talked a little bit about ISO 27001 and 27002, the International Information Security Standards. We learned that 27002 is a deeper dive into the 114 controls over 14 clauses that's listed in one of the appendix of ISO 27001. This week I wanted to just walk through those clauses and some of those controls to give you an idea of what really are some of the requirements of ISO 27002. The first clause is the information security policies. And this really is to provide the policy structure for governing information security activities. So a lot of organizations will have just one policy, an overarching information security policy, while other organizations will have that and also separate policies depending upon specific needs and areas. Like, for example, acceptable use policy, which typically you would want to have your staff sign off on every year, or classification of information. The next clause is the organization of information security, and this reaches more into the governance, if you will, and the roles and the responsibilities of those who are actually performing information security duties, which, believe it or not, is everybody. It's not just the responsibility of the Chief Information Security Officer or the Chief Information Officer or the equivalents thereof. Really, there's a portion of security that is everybody's responsibility. Making sure that duties are separated with regards to not allowing for a situation where there could be collusion is part of this clause, as well as contact with outside authorities such as the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security, and also special interest groups such as InfraGard or ISSA or IC Squared and those sorts of organizations. It also will dive into making sure that information security is contained within project management. You don't want to include information security at the end of a project because it's a lot more difficult to bolt it on then than it is if you have it included as part of the project start. Then we walk into, as a part of that, also mobile devices and telecommuting to lay out those sorts of rules and restrictions. If you have folks that are going to be working remotely, how is that done? How is that extra security element put in place to make sure that they have the same sense of security, that they're not introducing any more risk to the environment than if they were on the network itself? Then the next section dives deeper into people, so this is human resource security, looking at aspects prior to employment, such as background checks, during employment, such as ongoing training and how are they disciplined if there is a breach of some sort of policy or procedure, and then what to do with regards to termination. The next section, the next clause, is asset management. Now, one thing to understand here is that information is an asset as well. So we're not just talking physical assets here, we're talking all assets. So the first part of this clause deals with understanding what you have, so and how you manage that. So an inventory of assets, how that's kept up to date, how they are used, and how they are managed and returned, such as with termination. That was part of the previous clause. And then there's also information. So as we mentioned before, the information is a significant asset, and so understanding properties of that, such as classifying the information. Most organizations will classify information in at least 3 categories. Sometimes it's 4 or more. The 3 basic ones would be public, private, and confidential. And then once you understand what that classification is, well, how do you handle it? How do you label it? How do you process it? Are you making sure that you are providing the correct controls commensurate to the level of risk of that information? And then finally, for media that holds this information, do you have the processes in place to properly dispose of it? Access control and user access management. This is about, again, making sure that employees and other staff, that their access is commensurate to their role in the organization. We have a phrase for that in information security. It's the principle of least privilege. And really, this section details several different subcontrols that all focus on principle of least privilege. In other words, a user, a staff member, can only have access to the information and the resources that they need in order to do their job effectively, and nothing more, nothing less. And then moving on to the next section, which is cryptography. Well, this is making sure that you're, as an organization, taking care of managing properly your cryptographic keys, your encryption keys. This could be using a key manager. There are systems out there and platforms to do that, or sometimes a more homegrown type system for managing. It really doesn't matter the type of tool that's being involved with regards to this control, and really any control here. It's just that the risk that the control is addressing is mitigated. So then that's an important point, that ISO and any other standard won't prescribe the exact control that you have to put in place, the exact solution rather, but will prescribe the requirements for each of the controls. We'll pick up next week on the rest of the controls. Until then, stay secure.